Well, first of all, let me say that on balance, I support the treaty. I support the treaty. I have no reason to doubt that it's the best that our government and our officials have been able to negotiate in a bad, weak negotiating situation, not of our making, against our wishes, Brexit. So I accept that this is the best deal that Gibraltar could negotiate. The question is then whether we ask the UK to ratify it for us or not. And that is an issue which I've always described as price versus price, and people will make their own call on that. I am making the call that on balance, I think that this treaty ought to be supported, provided we can do it in confidence that we are politically safe and secure going into the future. And this is where the safety, and what I've described as the safety net, we don't need it from Spain, we don't need it from the EU, we need it from the United Kingdom. And what is that safety net? It's the same safety net, by the way, that the EU has given Spain. The treaty contains a provision that says that either party can terminate it, exit from it, on 12 months' notice, and the EU have said that if Spain asks it to do so, it will give that 12 months' notice to execute it. And we say, therefore, that we should have the same. Why? Circumstances change. It is not humanly possible for the Gibraltar government to have foreseen all the things that would happen over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. There are provisions in it which are open to abuse in a way that we would not be able to live with. And therefore, it is the safety net, this political security that I say the UK can give us, is the same as the EU have done to Spain. If it turns out, in the way this operates, or because of changing circumstances, that this agreement is not working well for us and is not politically acceptable to Gibraltar, we should be able, we, not the United Kingdom, who may have interests of their own that are different to ours, we should be able to request the United Kingdom to trigger the exit clause. On that basis, we would be completely safe.
So, Peter, are you surprised that such an assurance hasn't been included in the treaty? For what reason would you say it hasn't been?
Well,
could it be in the concordat?
Well, I understand. Look, I have no doubt that the Gibraltar government has been discussing these things with the British government. I suspect what's happened is that it's a bit of a rush now because of the desire to start this on the 1st of April, and there just hasn't been time to finish it. Probably the reason why it's not in the treaty, like the Spanish exit right is in the treaty, is for UK technical legal reasons about sovereignty of Parliament and that sort of stuff. But that is not to say that the UK cannot agree it with us, with Gibraltar, in an agreement called the concordat, as you quite rightly say. And that is what I am asking for. And my concern is that if the Gibraltar Parliament rushes unnecessarily, and I'll explain in a moment why unnecessarily, if the Gibraltar Parliament rushes to ask the UK to ratify this treaty on Tuesday, then our hand will be off the handbrake forever. We lose control. It's then the UK's ratification. They will ratify if they please. And I say unnecessary, and then we will have lost all leverage and all ability to, dare I use the word, pressure the UK to agree to give us the same thing as the EU has given Spain. And I say unnecessarily because while I understand the Gibraltar government's desire to start this in April so that we don't have to immediately in April put up these wretched e-gates and things of that sort, the two things are compatible. In other words, as a matter of law, in order to start the treaty provisionally, all that the UK has to do is to sign it, not ratify it. And therefore, Parliament could, on Tuesday, tomorrow, ask the UK simply to sign it, not to ratify it yet. Or some version of words, some formula of words that the government is better placed to work out than me, that would not be the definitive green light for the UK in a way that we cannot call back if the UK refuses to give us the concordat, the safety net, which I think is very important.
Well, do you think the UK would have a case to refuse that? And do you think Spain might have a case to say, well, hold on a minute, that's not what we agreed?
No, this is not about agreement or not agreement. This is entirely in the United Kingdom's gift. It's nothing to do with Spain, nothing to do with the EU. And I think the UK should give it to us, not just because Spain has it. So if it doesn't work well for Spain, she can walk away. If it doesn't work well for us, we're potentially trapped in it unless we can persuade the UK to trigger the exit. And I say this is too important to leave to a wing and a prayer, hope or trust. Secondly, if the UK doesn't give us the comfort, and it's not just termination, it's not making decisions within the structures of the treaty against our wishes, allowing our competent authorities to participate. Otherwise, it's constitutionally, apart from being politically unsafe, it rolls back our constitutional self-government by decades. So I think there is and unlike Monaco, that doesn't face a sovereignty claim from France, we know that Spain will continue to prosecute her sovereignty claim. Historically, she has done so with a fair degree of hostility, and she may do that again in the future if there is a change of government in Spain.
Okay, let's just rewind a moment. You said that UK could still sign, but the UK would sign once Gibraltar says it's agreed the treaty. Go ahead and you can sign. So are you saying Parliament, and I'm talking about the opposition here, we don't know what their position is. They had their meeting yesterday. They're not going to reveal their position until Tuesday. Parliament still has to give the go-ahead, though, for it to get signed. So would Parliament be expected to give the go-ahead without the assurance?
So long as we're not asking the UK to ratify, I have no difficulty with the UK being asked to sign, subject to Gibraltar having a final word on ratification, because it's the ratification that entraps us in the future without the ability to get out of our own free will. And that is potentially a trap for Gibraltar of an existential political nature.
And it would have to be in a concordat, something that was legally binding, not just a letter.
A concordat, something that binds. The usual way to do these things is a concordat, and I understand the government does want a concordat and is working on it. So this is about timing. I doubt that the Chief Minister is hearing anything today that he hasn't already thought about, and on Keith Sobandy for that matter. But it's about timing. It's the fact that this is happening tomorrow before the concordat has had time to be negotiated with the UK and agreed.
So, Sir Peter, black and white, unless you get this assurance, you wouldn't support this treaty?
Unless we get those assurances from the UK, we cannot have confidence that we can participate in these arrangements with permanent political safety and political security in the context of changing circumstances at any time in the future, which we cannot possibly predict today. And the future of Gibraltar and our rights to self-determination and our socio-economic prosperity and our political security are too important to leave to chance and the hope that whoever is the UK government at the time is going to respond to a request from Gibraltar. Let them commit to do it now. Okay,
let's talk about some of the areas of concern you raised. We heard in the introduction there, boots on the ground. Your legal opinion, which the government has published, is that the treaty makes no concessions of legal sovereignty to Spain, but you list a number of areas where, although there's no sovereignty concession, they may undermine the enforceability of our laws by our own law enforcement agencies. And then you conclude the section by saying more boots on the ground. So let's be clear. You're saying the treaty as it stands means there will be boots on the ground in Gibraltar.
Yes, but that's not to be confused with sovereignty. First of all, I'm not at liberty.
Isn't boots on the ground?
I'll answer your question. Mm-hmm. I'm not at liberty. Obviously, the government is, and I understand they will on Tuesday in the House share the legal advice that I have given to the government. But I have said in my Chronicle piece this morning, and if this were not the case, I could not be supporting the treaty with or without the safety net, that there are no concessions on legal sovereignty of Gibraltar. That's not to be confused.
So boots on the ground is not sovereignty concession?
No. People have got to understand what sovereignty means in law. It means the right to govern your own affairs without the ability of some other country to impose their will on you. And British sovereignty is in no way undermined, compromised, or diluted by anything in this treaty. Of that, I am clear. If not, firstly, I would not have been able to give the legal opinion that I've given, and secondly, I would certainly not be able to provide political support. If you agree to something, as everybody else in Europe has done, to allow police to hot pursuit and continued surveillance and some of the other things that may result in boots on the ground in Gibraltar, that is not a concession of your sovereignty. That is, so long as you do it voluntarily and of your own free will and you're not forced by anybody else to do it, that is an exercise of your sovereignty. That is an attribute of your sovereignty. Countries, technically, every time any two countries agree with somebody else to do or not to do something in a treaty, every time any sovereign country enters into a treaty, they are agreeing in the future to behave or not to behave in a certain way, to act or not to act in a certain way. That is not a violation of their sovereignty. This has got to be understood.
The Chief Minister
we don't
said...
we don't like it. Rightly, we don't like
Peter,
it, but it's not sovereign.
The Chief Minister said no boots on the ground. You're saying, yes, there are boots on the ground.
No, I have not heard the Chief Minister say no boots on the ground.
He has said it. He said it on Viewpoint last week.
This agreement, then let's be clear, this agreement provides, particularly if it is abused, but even if it is not abused, provides opportunities and rights for Spanish law enforcement agencies to be physically present in Gibraltar, either in some circumstances unmarked vehicles and not in uniform, in other circumstances in marked uniform, and in both circumstances armed, from what I can tell.
On land.
That on land. Now, that is not a question of sovereignty, and if that is what is meant by boots on the ground, then there is that scope for boots on the ground. But that is true of all 27 member states with their neighbours, to a greater extent in our case because of some of the things that, for example, France is doing for Monaco and Spain is doing for us in the context of our access to their club, to their shared space, which is what I call the prize. People will decide whether the price is too high. I think the price has to be paid.
You are very concerned, though, about the language used in respect to the joint vehicle that will be running the Gibraltar airport.
No, I would be very concerned if the joint venture company were running running the airport. So there is a provision in the treaty, Article 274, that says that it will be established a joint venture company between the government of Spain and the government of the United Kingdom in respect to Gibraltar. Hopefully that means the Gibraltar government and not the UK government. For what purpose, this joint venture company, which will be set up in the Republic of Ireland, I understand, not in Gibraltar. The purpose of that, I am assured by the government, is to supervise the EU tender process to select the commercial operator of the airport and then to supervise it to the commercial operator that is appointed by this tender process to make sure that EU tender rules are complied with and to make sure that the operator complies with the obligations under the treaty. If that is correct, and the role of the joint venture company goes no further than that, then I have no sovereignty, no jurisdiction, and no political concerns with that. But if it goes beyond that, and it is not clear from the language of the treaty whether it does or it doesn't, I am relying on the assurances that I've had internally from the government. But if it were to be wrong, and the government were to be mistaken, and it did go beyond that, then I think it would have adverse implications to our jurisdiction over our own airport.
Sir Peter, I would love to speak more about this with you, but you are going to be joining me for Viewpoint on Thursday, so we can speak more about it. I know that there are other concerns that you've raised about the future risk should Gibraltar not have that assurance, should the UK rejoin the EU. But we can talk about that on Thursday. You're joining me for Viewpoint. Thank you very much for coming in today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Ros.
Thank you.